Yeah. Your schedule.
But not, with all due respect.
Take a knee.
His husband went to, he's a lawyer, he just dropped dead. He was a Navy head lawyer.
Tomorrow.
College
Got out of the Navy.
application.
Yeah.
And I'm not pro anybody, but she says to me, 85% of the Texas.
Yeah, that's
But she says it's
sometimes is the first choice, and then that's the reality, right? Officers in Rhode Island? Oh. I tired. I'm thinking you said Rhode Island. Oh, you
not
got
much more complicated than
that
that,
in New York.
you know?
No, really, because, I mean, if they've been without standard medical care for years.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Just trying to remember.
I don't buy
just-
either way.
Guys panhandling. Go 2 feet and there's a sign at McDonald's, help wanted. I just get pissed.
Do the pledge in about 1 minute. So.
Probably not. I'll run out.
Yeah,
I got a pretty big house,
yeah,
Time here.
and
yeah.
I said, Eric, what do you need for money?
30 seconds. For
I'll do it when
The
they
job is done,
oral
Yeah.
communications. I turned to
Oh, I know.
okay? These guys work,
I know,
With the
I know,
headlamp on.
I know.
give that to you guys.
Thank you.
and they would,
I know.
they did everything. There
All I
was-
need to know, but thank you.
Eric was on vacation, he went down to the island.
5 years ago, 5 years ago,
You can't get white kids to do that.
you can't. 5 years ago, we had to fix up a school like
That's a
over
big
a
lacrosse
weekend,
school, too, isn't
Columbus Day weekend. We couldn't get any.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
It was the funniest thing.
It's funny, but it's not, Jim.
I know, I
Fun to
know.
watch, though.
My house
Stop
on the
all
beach,
Right.
got a
I
guy,
do that too, and I have to go in.
comes some wind,
Play for a
rain,
small
snow, he's
college
up
in
on the roof. I mean, he's spectacular.
I never knew what it was.
Right, isn't it?
No, no, I agree.
Like, I'm 50, so this is
It's true.
You can't,
hard. Like,
It's,
I mean, not work anymore. You can't.
I can get to hit
it
people.
asphalt, you see it.
I don't think
I know.
I mean, Mitt Romney had him do it as well.
it's not fair for girls, because that pocket is just.
If you ask people that, business, who did I ask the other day? Had lunch down at the Beauport,
Google Apps.
and I was talking to him.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's really.
Work on his head. I said, what? He said, no, they
Son
got
is-
prepared to
he's
go
20
out.
now.
They want to work after two. I was in tears.
I was watching.
Oh,
It is a different world.
it is.
Girls lacrosse game? Or?
This one's on.
Want to check it out, Bob? All right. I'm calling to order the meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on January 9th, 2019 in the Triton High School Library at 7 p.m. This meeting is audio and video recorded. I'll begin by reading the vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families in the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. If I could have you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm going to open with number 3, the chairperson's remarks. I know Olivia's going to talk about this in a little while, but we had 10 students who went to the Mass Conference for Women, which was terrific, and I know she's going to fill us in on the details. We had 15 National Honor Society inductions in December as well, so congratulations to all the inductees. Abigail Wing was on guest on the Ask Away Lead with Languages website, and I have to say I didn't get to attend all of them, but I watched the middle school, high school, and I did actually attend the Pine Grove School holiday concerts. They're a lot of fun if you get a chance to watch them. I especially enjoyed the You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but it is a riot. I wanted to follow up on 2 specific items as well. The vaping discussion that we talked about last time about the local regulations, the last kind of cog in that wheel to wrap everything up was Raleigh's Board of Health actually approving the local health regulation to change the purchase age for the town from 18 to 21 prior to the state regulation coming in, and they actually voted that through. So we now have in all 3 of our towns coverage for purchases under 21, despite the state regulation having that loophole. I'm also announcing that we received notification, which you'll find in your correspondence section, from Whittier that 2 of their school committee members are coming up for reappointment. Those 2 members are Lana Gilbert and Dave Irving from Salisbury and Raleigh, respectively. I have received letters from both Alana and Dave saying that they are interested in reappointment. If anyone else is interested in those seats, they should send a letter to the superintendent's office, to my care, at the central office, or they can email those as well. We'd like to have those in by the end of January and are hoping to make our reappointment votes, or appointment votes, I should say, at the February meeting. Also, a very happy birthday to the lady to my left, Miss Deborah Choate. Thank you for spending your birthday with us. I'll open it up to item 4, oral communications from the public. Larry? Sorry, Larry White. I'll give you my mic since we don't have a standing one. We do? Oh, we do. Never mind. Oh. No, Bob's checking. Hang on.
Okay, I notice on your schedule that you have a fiscal year 20 budget consideration, but in past meetings and nowhere else have I seen any value put on the budget as yet as far as a top figure that you're working on. So I decided to come up with one for you. And I'm taking the Raleigh assessment that was approved at the annual town meeting of, thank you, $9,822,000, $873. If you add to that the $290,000 that we have proposed, you come up with a new figure of about $10,112,000, and you can impute a Triton budget from that of about 31 to 32 million. So that's what we see as a target for the Triton budget. Now, we realize that you've come up with a preliminary estimate of $1.8 million increase over this year's budget, and that's understandable. I hope in your presentations you will have some consideration and address that issue on how you're going to offset that to come up with a budget that the towns can afford. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. If I could just get a quick clarification before you leave. You said "we" a number of times. Are you speaking as an individual, as the chair of the finance committee, or for the town of Rowley?
This is a oral communications from the public, so I'm speaking as a individual.
As an individual. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 5, the consent agenda. I'm going to read aloud the donations with our sincere thanks. In the donations, we have a 3-year lease on 60 Chromebooks and 3 carts valued at $27,437 and a penny, donated by the Pine Grove School PTA to be used in Pine Grove School classrooms. A commission check in the amount of $1,683 donated by Sullivan Studios to be used by the Salisbury Elementary School principal at his discretion for student needs. The commission check is from the purchases of student photos this past fall. And a check in the amount of $1,000 from Kathleen and Daniel Lyons to be used in the middle school health office. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? Yours isn't working either?
No. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Dina? The revolving account report? No, sorry. Okay, revolving account report. Okay. Can I, so I'm calling a motion to, so can we, I think we need to, right, okay, the motion carries. All right, all in favor? Unanimous. Moving on to item 6, the student advisory report, please, Olivia.
On Thursday, December 6th, students Maddie Butler, Ainsley Marsh, Olivia Valley, Jamie Bell, Katie Rooney, Amy Clark, Mia, and Emily Colby, chaperoned by Ms. Daw and Ms. Ober, attended the Women's Conference in Boston. Joined by Hamilton Wenham girls at the Massachusetts Conference, the students broke off into designated young women's programs and heard from many talented young people. They also got to hear from many famous guest speakers. The students listened to author Elizabeth Gilbert and her thoughts on strength coming from calmness and acceptance. They heard Maysoon Zayed and her life as a comedian with cerebral palsy, as well as statistics about police brutality towards disabled people. At the end of the conference, they listened to human rights lawyer Amal Clooney and her current counsel to Nadia Murad and other Yazidi women regarding ISIS. The conference went really well, and all the selected students were happy to have been able to attend the educational event and learn more about their future as women in America. On Thursday, December 13th, Triton's Community Service Club hosted their annual Senior Citizen Tea. Hosted in the library, Triton's Jazz and Concert Band, as well as the Women's, Men's, Jazz, Select Choir, and singers performed for the Newbury Council on Aging. The performance groups were instructed by Ms. Densmore and Mr. Lathrop, and there was a lot of enthusiasm and, in the end, audience participation. The winter concert, featuring all the songs, was successfully held in the auditorium on Thursday, December 20th. The first week back from vacation, during Wednesday's advisory, a cautionary video was shown to students about the effects of vaping, and an anonymous survey was given out. Due to the survey remaining anonymous, most students answered truthfully, but some acted like the survey was a fun exercise rather than a test of nicotine addiction. Midterms are approaching fast, and Triton students are thankful for the teachers offering extra help and after-school preparation for the exams. As an early thank you for this and everything else our teachers do, Student Council continued their tradition of secret student for each department in our school. From baked goods to thank you cards, each department received gifts from different committees and Student Council during the week leading up to winter break. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Olivia. Questions? Wonderful. Thank you, Olivia.
Thanks.
All right. Opening it up to item 7, new business. All right, and moving on to item 8, the reports and deliberations. Item A, fiscal 2020 budget development.
So there is nothing, I don't think I'm on.
Oh.
It's like the musical mics.
So we do not have new information to share. Obviously, next week we start our presentations on Tuesday the 15th. So we wanted to keep this on the agenda in case there was any new information. We unfortunately don't have any new information from the state. I don't know if you want to
Yes.
have the discussion
Yep.
about some state activities during this item, but there is nothing new, no new information. You have in front of you a binder. By Friday, you will have the guts of that binder delivered to your home. It will be tabbed, but the binders don't fit in mailboxes. So you have the binder tonight. Otherwise, we have to leave them indoors, and if it's raining, and Patty's had that experience trying to stuff them in places. So you've got the binder. On Friday, you'll get a packet, everything in order, all presentations for both Tuesday and Wednesday, Tuesday the 15th and Wednesday the 16th. And we're posting those in a way that if we have the ability and we have some time on Tuesday, we can take items ready to go, and it's more of a fluid discussion. So unless there's any discussion or questions about that, I know Narissa has some information she'd like to share.
So just as a reminder, those 2 meetings next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, are starting at 6 p.m., not 7 p.m. I know I've personally made that mistake in the past, so I will try to help you from making that mistake. So the first night will be the five schools and middle school, high school athletics. If they have time, then items from Wednesday will feed into the end of that night, and Wednesday, in theory, will be district technology, special education, and curriculum and instruction, and maintenance operations and other. Keeping a strong eye on what's been going on at the state. I put a letter in front of you right at the end, and I apologize for this being very last minute tonight. At about 11 o'clock, I think it was, this morning, Senator Sonia Chang Diaz filed what they're calling the Education Promise Act. This is... So let me back up a little bit, I guess. So in 2015, there was the Foundation Budget Review Commission, which reviewed the way that the base for the Chapter 70 formula is put together, and they made some very specific recommendations on it. Last year, during the state budget cycle, the Senate tried to put through the entire set of recommendations, and then the House tried to put together put through three quarters of the recommendations. They kind of met together to hash out that detail of that last quarter at the end, failed before the deadline, and nothing was passed last year. Starting in the fall, there was a coalition that started to become very public. It's a group called Fund Our Future that's put together by through the Mass Teachers Association, AFT, a parents group called Phenom, the Mass Educational Justice Alliance, and they were working on this this model that was put out by Mass Budget. That's basically the Foundation Budget Review Commission recommendations, plus $50 per pupil minimum aid, plus a charter school minimum aid that would be phased in over a period of 5 years. Mass Budget had been kind enough to publish numbers on that so that we would know exactly what the modeling looked like. And I've actually corresponded with the author of that report, and he has been very kind in answering questions. The legislation that was filed this morning is essentially that same model. Because of the way that Triton's population, by and large, that's the biggest factor in here, has decreased over the years, we are in a position that's called hold harmless, where basically our foundation, our Chapter 70 does not go up significantly every year, but it also does not go down over what we received the previous year. The way that works is it essentially gives us a gap. It's what they think we should get, and then we can never come down. So they believe as our enrollment has gone down, we should be receiving less and less money because the foundation budget is a per pupil formula. There's this big gap in the middle. So as the Promise Act, as this is what Sonia Chang Diaz filed this morning, is known. It's essentially raising this, but not enough that it gets to the point where we start seeing incremental money above that, or significant incremental money above that kind of floor that we've been sitting at so far. We know that there's a problem with per pupil funding formulas. When you take a student out of the classroom, your costs don't go down. Your costs don't go down until you lose a significant number of students. And at that point, you're still only dropping maybe one classroom. You still often have all your administrators. You still have your heating bill. You still have your schools open. It essentially makes your cost per pupil go up and your overall costs only come down incrementally compared to what you have compared to what your student enrollment drop is. At the same time, your costs are rising, so you're essentially still paying more. I mean, that's the effect that we've been seeing for the last, whatever, 7, 8 years, really, longer, 10 years. As our towns have had to bear more and more of the impact of our budget, those costs rising, while the state has borne essentially a smaller percentage of the funding responsibility for our budget. The legislation that was filed this morning depends on that foundation budget and not rising. It does not increase our foundation budget enough to bridge that gap. We would not be seeing additional money from this act. It would be essentially minimal. We'd see some based on our students that go to River Valley Charter School. We would see a small amount based on the per pupil minimum aid that's in there. Over 5 years, it would total about $530,000, so about $100,000 a year. By comparison, over the previous 5 years, so when I went back and looked at 2014 to 2018, our increase in Chapter 70 was $340,000. So this whole education funding reform to us would mean about $30,000 a year more than what we've made in what our funding has increased from the state in past years. It's minimal. It's not going to solve any of our problems. My first reaction was to reach out to our legislators because it's been 25 years since the Education Reform Act of 1993. We can't wait another 25 years in order to have something that's actually going to impact us in a positive way. I drafted a note to or an email to Senator Tarr this afternoon that you have in your packet. I'd like to do the same thing for the rest of our legislators. It outlines not only our situation, but it looks at the situation of other towns that are in their district, because by and large, we're very similar to the towns in this area. If you look at it, the only town that is getting a significant increase from this legislation would be North Andover. I gave away my copy of the letter, but it was $2.2 million, exactly. So all of the rest of the districts are getting maybe a couple of $100,000 a year more. And again, they're getting some of that state aid in the past already. So it's not like this is newfound money. This is, some portion of that they've been seeing already. My question to you tonight is, this was my gut instinct. My feeling is that we need to make our legislators very aware that this is not going to help us. I feel like there's a lot of hope out there. I see a lot of districts that aren't going to see a lot from this type of legislation, but they have a lot of hope because they know that they're in a tough spot financially, and they want to believe that someone who understands that they're in a tough spot financially and wants to help them has created a vehicle that is going to help them, even though in reality, for a lot of them, it has not. I haven't had a chance to run all the numbers yet, but a lot of the districts that I was looking at, I would say probably between 30 and 40% of them, this is a less than 10% increase over 5 years. So small amount for what is actually needed by these districts. So my question to you tonight is, do you want me to send these letters? If so, we don't have a process for doing this, I guess. So my question is, do we need to create a process for doing this, or what would you like us to do right now in that kind of this was my gut reaction, and I want to go the direction that the committee wants to go in? Deb?
Hello?
Ooh, you got one that works.
I got a live one. Excuse me. I think this is the process that if we want to communicate something, the letter could be written by the chair or by anyone else, and then it comes before the board. That's what I think the process is. And my thoughts are that I don't know when the vote would be taken on this, but yeah, so I think getting this out as soon as possible, like tomorrow, would be the best thing to do.
Any other feedback, or is there, yep, Paul?
My only feedback would be if we could get these things sooner than the meeting, and if you can put a date on it, that's all.
Yes, so this was, it happened this morning.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
'cause it would help us be able to absorb it, but I think Debbie's hit the nail on the head. I just think it takes a vote with
Okay.
the committee.
Okay. Dina?
Narissa, are you asking if this should come from just you, or do you want this from the committee? Is that what your concern is, or?
Well, that's part of the question. Part of the question is, does the committee want to go in this direction? Because this is a pretty definitive, I mean, I feel comfortable going to the legislators, which I've always done in the past, and voice my personal opinion. And I always state it as, I'm a member of the school committee, I'm also a parent in the district. This is what I'm asking you to do. In this case, I feel like this should possibly come from the committee and be a committee, voice.
Endorsed, yes.
Exactly.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be signed by 9 people, but if there was a statement that added on behalf of the Triton Regional School Committee, Narissa Wallen, Chair. So I think if there's a vote tonight, if the 9 of you agree, then it's a matter of you tweaking the 5 letters so it's the right people in the right communities, and then we get it in the mail.
Although
We'll
seeing
hand deliver
9
them.
signatures is not a bad thing either.
The seeing them, it's the collecting them. Had this not happened at 11
Well,
and this
that's
got
true.
drafted
That's
at 3, we could have come.
Right.
Narissa could have had those copies ready to sign, but this was literally.
You can see my pen edits on,
Yeah.
on the document.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to be here at 5:30, so. Jim?
So can we make a motion to authorize you, on behalf of the school committee, to compose and sign and forward a letter to the appropriate legislative members?
Okay, yes, thank you. Sorry, before we go on.
That's fine, I
Okay.
agree as well, because I think it's a great way to show our senators and our legislators that we know exactly what we're getting and what other towns are getting, and we want them to be aware of it.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. So,
I was just going to say I agree, and if Jim just made the motion, I'll second it.
okay. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Thank you.
I was going to say, as a suggestion,
Yep.
aside from going around to find 9 signatures, if you had wanted to sign it chair, vice chair, and secretary, I don't know if, 1, 2, 3, if you 3 are closer and able to get back in here tomorrow or Friday to sign them. I agree, signatures look great.
No, that's a fair point. I
Yeah.
mean, you're right. No, it's, on behalf of the committee is fine with me. I have no issue with that.
Deb?
Is there any indication as to when they might vote on this, like tomorrow, next week, or we don't know?
No, we don't know. So this is definitely what Fund Our Futures is backing, and they're pushing it strongly. They actually had, I think, 2 huge forums last night. They're having another one tonight. So they're trying to push this through clearly as fast as possible. In her remarks today, Senator Chang Diaz said that she would like to see this in for next school year, which, if that's actually happening, then it has to be part of the budget process this year, which, I mean, that's soon. We'd be talking about, I mean, the governor's budget will be hopefully coming out January 23rd, and then the House would be like the second week of March, and the Senate would be the last week of April.
Right, well, I mean, I think whether it's 1 signature, 3 signatures, or 9 signatures, we'll all be here Tuesday.
Yes, that's true. That is true. We will all
True.
be here Tuesday.
Yeah. And as
I
far
could get
as
an email version off, and then we could get a print copy later if that
get all
is-
9 signatures.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to say, so the email I sent, you all saw a copy of that Narissa references here. I didn't get a large response via email. There weren't a lot of superintendents that wanted to reply and stick their neck out and get in trouble like me. But I have heard from a lot in person who I've spoken with who have said, we're there, we're the exact same scenario. And this isn't just small regional schools, this is cities, this is towns. I mean, you have Amesbury who wouldn't get $1 more than us. Or $1 more, except for scenario 4. So it's just, it's a different, it's a bigger beast than people understand, and people are getting blindly behind it. But I think there are enough folks slowly catching on that this won't be pushed through. That's my hope.
That would be mine too, but there's a lot of
There's always
momentum.
danger
on
in
this one, I
assuming,
would
though.
say. There is also discussion that the governor has said he will release his own version of an education reform bill, so I don't know what that's going to look like either, but I would anticipate that would be sometime in the next couple of weeks. I don't know, the legislature filing deadline is the 18th. I don't know if it's the same for the governor, but I would assume it is.
My assumption is he would file that with House 1, the
With House
budget,
1,
his
yeah.
budget. Yeah.
I just have a
Yeah,
question.
Jim?
What is the logic behind the North Andover distribution? Does anybody know?
I hadn't had a chance to really look specifically at it. My guess would be just having looked at Newburyport's earlier, because we share Senator DeZoglio has a new report as well. So I had quickly looked at those numbers, is that there's probably a charter school involved. Newburyport's numbers go from 550,000 for just Foundation Budget Review Commission, so just those things that were studied into the report, to I think $2.6 million once you add in the charter and the minimum aid, which is minimal. I mean, $50 per pupil per year for 5 years is minimal compared to $2.6 million. So, but I'll try to figure that out as I go. Unfortunately, this was a literally, you know, kind of get it done and trying to get it figured out as fast as you can so that I could have something for tonight, because I didn't want to leave it to sit until next week, because there are co-sponsors that are signing on already. As of when I looked this afternoon, I believe there were 7 co-sponsors on this bill already. So I would like to get to our legislators before they sign on and make sure that they understand the impact of this on the districts that are in their legislative district. Is there anything else on fiscal year 2020 budget development? Sorry.
So are we holding this till Tuesday?
I think what I'm going to do, with permission, is I'll email it as soon as I have them all ready to the legislators, and then on Tuesday I will bring we'll have paper copies prepared, and we can all sign those and send a paper copy after the fact if that's amenable. And I would also of course take this the final versions of the letters and write a summary email to the district communications committee, because we would certainly hope, again, because it is very easy to have hope and to understand that they're talking to people who are in the same position that you believe you yourself are in, that this is a solution, when in fact it will not be for us.
So then the motion that I made is incorrect.
Okay.
The motion that I made was to authorize you to do it on behalf of the committee. But
well, I'm going to email on behalf of the committee.
Yeah, I think it still stands because Narissa can email saying this is coming formally signed.
Okay.
But then you're clean to email them directly and tomorrow.
And then we'll send a nice printed signed copy from everyone on Tuesday.
FedEx it. We'll hand deliver it.
Hand deliver it. There we go. Is there anything else on fiscal year 2020 budget development? Okay. District-wide technology availability and application, and I believe this is Deb and Kim who are handling this jointly.
It is, but I just want to tee it up because this is going to sound a little bit like a budget presentation. But as we talked about this, we realized that we haven't spent the time to make a presentation to the committee about where we stand with technology. Kim has been doing some work about was it adaptive technology and the use of technology, and we talk a lot about devices, we talk about Wi-Fi, we talk about security, but we don't talk about how is technology being used as an educational tool. So we decided it makes sense, rather than burying this into an already long evening of budget discussions, to have a time tonight where they can present to you from the instructional and from the technical side where we stand with technology. So with that, over to you, Kim.
Thank you. So as Brian has said, as we start talking about technology just hold it. Okay. As we start talking about technology needs, when we got principals around the table, we had a lot of varying questions about the different types of needs. And to me, that just led me down the path that, wow, we use technology in many different ways across the district for many different purposes. So for us to take a step back to take inventory of how do we utilize technology, how important is it from day to day, because that does impact the resources that we have within the school. And so again, going into budget season, we really want to take notice of what we have as far as resources, so that we're being very responsible within the budget and making choices that our students will benefit from. So in preparation for tonight, it was great to kind of have some solid time with Deb talking about the big picture of technology. So moving forward, the objective of tonight's presentation is to provide information on how the Triton School District uses technology within the schools and throughout the greater community to support learning, improve communication, and enhance security. So these are three very different purposes. And also to update the committee and the community on the current technology needs within the district with some numbers, not just a guess or I think this is where we're heading, but some actual numbers. So in order to get that information, we did send out a survey to all the educators within the district, K through 12. So technology just within the school serves many purposes, as I had just said. Instruction, so it supports the learning and it reinforces some of the concepts and the skills that the teachers have taught or are teaching. So it really enhances that learning environment. There are separate technology courses that we have that begin at the elementary level in a very basic way, but then they spiral up to the middle school. We were able to introduce some coding classes at the middle school, which again really takes the kids and introduces them to coding so that when they get to the high school, they have more opportunities with sophisticated classes in the area of computer software programming. We also use technology to communicate, and it really does help improve the communication between home and school by providing real-time access to important information, such as grades, homework, assignments, also security. This has been a huge area that has kind of blown up over the last few years. To ensure the physical safety of our students and staff within the school buildings, as well as our informational systems. And again, this is also becoming very scary in the world that we live, that people are hacking into schools and actually demanding a ransom until they can get their files secure. So this is a real situation that people are experiencing right now that are costing districts a lot of money if they don't have the proper security in place. And then reporting. So to capture and report out on student and staff data, that is a required state mandate that we have to report out every year. So they take our files, they upload right into a database. So again, we have to have technology to support that. There's no way you can do that through a paper and pencil task. So these are the different purposes, and we'll go into each one of them kind of very briefly tonight. So as I stated, we had a technology survey, and teachers in grades K through 12 were asked to participate in this survey. We only had 99 teachers respond after we had sent it out at least 2 or 3 times to the survey. And the below graph shows you the percentage of teachers at each grade span who responded to the survey. I can tell you the high school teachers, their responses came in the quickest. So we had K through 2, we had 32%. 3 through 6 was our highest. We had 41% people responding. Grades 7 through 8, we had 13 responding. And 9 through 12, we had 26% of the teachers responding. So again, this is out of 99 teachers. This is the breakdown of the grade level. So this is also going to play into how technology is used, and I'll share with that when I get to that slide. So instructional technology, that's only one way we use it. In the survey, teachers were asked how they use technology in their classrooms. Below is the results showing how technology is being implemented. Researching and word processing were commonly implemented across the district. That was the #1 way they used technology. We also found that more attention and training really needs to be directed towards using technology as a tool to access curriculum. To me, that's one of the most powerful ways that we can use technology, is to raise the bar for our students and giving them some type of scaffold through technology. And the apps that are available to do that have just doubled and tripled. So we really need to make sure that we have an eye on those particular apps and that type of technology, and making sure that we're increasing teachers' capacity to use that. So again, 66% of our teachers use that in the classroom for research. Word processing, 66% of teachers use technology to support word processing and multimedia presentations. Some of the big apps that they use right now are Google Classroom, obviously, where there's files and drives and that per se. And then there's PowerPoint such as slides, which is where this was developed, this particular PowerPoint. To reinforce skills, where you see at the elementary level where you have a lot of different centers set up, you have 63% of teachers who use technology to reinforce concepts and skills. So they've already taught the lesson. Kids need additional practice, and using technology can be very engaging for students. Assessment, 33% of teachers use technology to assess students' progress. This is beyond the mandated assessment that has to be done on the Chromebooks through MCAS or our district assessment, such as we use iReady. So again, moving assessment off of a paper and onto a device has been a huge shift. And then, as I had mentioned before, only 26% of the teachers use technology to make curriculum accessible to all students. An example of an app is that text-to-speech component that's already on our Chromebooks. So that's just an example of the technology aspect. As far as technology for courses, we have coding classes, computer graphics, computer engineering, advanced programming, video productions, and robotics. As I was putting this together, I had asked to get some data about not just how many courses that we offered, but were these courses filled? And I have to say they were filled. So it's not that we're just offering these classes and nobody's signing up or we have to drop some of them, but enrollment in these classes, in these computer classes, have increasingly gotten larger over the years, and I think that speaks to the changing job force that is out there. As far as communication, technology is used to communicate information related to the teaching and learning process. So as far as academic achievement, many teachers have Google Classroom set up with their students. We have our database called Aspen that records grades and sends out notices when students are not making adequate progress. And at the elementary level, they use a different standardized grade book, which is not something out of Aspen. We did just hear this week that Aspen has updated their platform to hopefully include a high-quality standards-based grading system so that teachers can all be on the same device or platform. And as far as to communicate curriculum, we have something called Atlas Curriculum Mapping, which is accessible to teachers as well as to parents, and that really maps out all the curriculum K through 12 that is covered in the class. Previous years, that did not exist. We kept our curriculum in a binder. And so, again, this just shows you kind of that shift of how technology has really made its way into school districts beyond just the classroom. Our new curriculum that we have implemented, they all have some type of digital textbook as well as supplementary material that you have to access through technology. So STEM Scopes, Math in Focus, Inspire Science. My Learning Plan is another platform that the teachers use to help track their professional development. We also use it for their evaluation system. And again, that also is wrapped into state reporting that's mandated. And we talked about the professional development plans. So again, just kind of taking that step back to say, wow, technology really is finding its way in all aspects of our educational system and very fast. So when we talk about what are the devices, right, that we use, we have tablets, and most often it's the younger grades that like the tablets because developmentally it's more appropriate for them as they use the touch screen. Chromebooks would be probably our most popular device, and I would say kids shift to that around second or third grade. And this year, third grade is going to be assessed from the MCAS using the Chromebooks. And I was in a classroom today, and there was a third grader just kind of pecking away at the keys, and I'm going, okay, this is going to be interesting. And they have had basic keyboarding practices, but if they're not on a device all the time, it's hard to get that type of practice that's needed to become skilled in that area. So according to, again, the surveys, we wanted to know what type of devices, personal or district owned, because at the high school, a lot of the kids will use their smartphones. Do students use most commonly in the classroom instruction throughout the district? Definitely 77, the biggest was 77% use Chromebooks. 17% use desktops. 16% kids use their smartphone. So if they don't have access and they're doing research, and if that's one of the #1 things that kids are looking things up, they can easily do that on their device. And then 8.2% use the devices, which is the tablets. So then we asked, how many days per week are students routinely able to access the digital platforms or digital resources that you have available, say, within the curriculum? So this was a little concerning. We had 33% that said 0 on a routinely basis are able to access digital platforms or digital resources. Also remember though, we also had a large number of K through 2 teachers who responded to this survey, so that could change too, depending on who you were asking. We had 15% that said 1 day per week, 9, 2 days, 13%, 3 days, 4, 3, and then 5 was about 25% of the teachers or the students have routinely able to access. And I would say routinely almost every single week, so that's the key word there. So I would like to dig down a little bit deeper into this question for sure. And then finally, at the end of the survey, I asked teachers to share with me any other thoughts that they had about technology regarding needs or celebrations. And so I think these 3 quotes really sum up some of the big ideas that I saw within the survey. And the first one says, in order to support my students' learning more effectively, I need more access to technology on a consistent basis. Also, technology that is working properly. Our Chromebook cart is not only minimal, but it is in need of updating. It is 4 years old, so it's really old, but that's old technology nowadays. And almost every Chromebook is missing keys at this point. Another comment is access to Chromebooks. This year has been better. We have really, the teachers have been very resourceful in looking for additional funding for Chrome carts, without a doubt. Sharing all 5 carts across the school has meant that there is usually 1 available when I need it. It was harder previously because if someone on my team was already using our cart, I had no other option. And then the final, again, speaks to kind of all of this. It sums it up. More training, more time, and equal access to all. So that kind of completes just the first overview of technology. And then Deb is going to bring you into some other ways that technology is used within the school district.
I think I need that too.
Yeah, you do.
I think I need another hand. Okay. Oh, hello, everyone. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, so I'm going to talk about technology, the other end of the technology, the actual physical part of technology, from end-user devices to what I call tech behind the scenes. The first slide we're going to speak about is the hot topic, Chromebooks. Now this is student-to-device ratio about our Chromebooks. All 5 schools are represented, but I want to bring your attention to the statistics in the middle. The 896 devices that we have district-wide, only 464 of those are leased. What that means is those are the only ones that are going to get refreshed every 3 years. We have 432 that are purchased. And as you saw in Kim's earlier one, they're old, they're 4 years old, the keys are missing. I don't know what it is with kids and picking keys off, but they just love to do that. And when we had the PCs with the, you know, when you push the drawer and you had the CD doors, they would pull those out and break they're constantly picking at things. But the newer Chromebooks actually are becoming less easy to destroy. But that's a very, very important statistic right there because our devices are aging and aging rapidly. So if you notice, the ratios, the only one that's pretty decent is the Salisbury. They're almost at a 2-to-1. And that's really what we're looking at right now is kind of going to a 2-to-1, you know, taking that first step, because ultimately it would be the best thing to have is a 1-to-1 for an ideal situation. But 2-to-1 is what we're going to be looking at first. And if you notice, like the high school, they're almost at a 3-to-1. So you'll be seeing later in my presentation next week when I talk about budget, about what we need to actually bring this up to more equitable levels. Continuing on with Chromebooks, these are the staff Chromebooks. Now you remember we have a lease for 300 staff Chromebooks. And some of you do have the Chromebooks that we lent you. And a lot of the teachers, mostly the teachers because we bought it for staff. The teachers, you'll see there are 198 that have them. Other staff also included in this were like nurses, principals, assistant principals. And what we found was that some of the teachers, and also some of you in the school committee, decided you didn't want to use it. And so we took them back and we repurposed them. And the first thing we did was we loaned them to 9 EL students in the high school. And then this fall, there was a need for the IAs to also have a Chromebook. So we looked at our supply and we lent those out as well. The only thing is that there are more IAs that really need them, but this was a quick, you know, we got to handle at least 13 IAs. And I actually gave a PD for them because they had no idea how to use this device with their students, introducing them to how to use Google Docs and Google Drive and take notes for their students. And if you look at the student level, not only the 9 are for the EL students, but if you notice, like each of the schools have 3, although Pine Grove has 1 more because they also have an EL student with the Chromebook. But they each have 3. That was a decision we made a few years back that we gave each school 3 as a floater, and most of them are using them for their SPED students. And then, well, that totals up to only 289, and you wonder where the other 11 are. Well, few we have in spares, and the rest are out being fixed because these things, they take a beating, you know, especially where we have them out with students out there. So those are Chromebooks. But we also, in IT, we also support other devices for students and staff. Chromebases are one of them. Now, are you any of you familiar with what a Chromebase is? What it really is just a large Chromebook. It, you know, has a big screen, has a keyboard, has a mouse. It looks like a PC, but it's just one big Chromebook. And if you notice the Chromebases, there are 21 at the high school. They're in their labs. A couple of them are in special ed classrooms. At NES and SES, when we refreshed one of their computer labs, they chose to go with Chromebases, which also helps them during MCAS. But Pine Grove, 2 years ago, decided that they didn't want Chromebases, and they chose instead to have a 24-cart Chromebook cart, you know, like 24 Chromebooks. So those 6 Chromebases that are at Pine Grove are in special ed classrooms. All those Chromebases, by the way, are on a lease. So those will get refreshed on a regular basis. The next column is about desktop PCs, and we have lots of them, 668 in the district. Most of those are for staff PCs. They're on every staff desk. But we also have them in some labs. They're over here in the library and in that computer lab. So they're still in labs. This lease actually has come due this summer. So we're looking at possibly turning them over into Chromebases or even Chromebook carts. And we're working with each of the librarians and the principals to find out what's their preferred device. And all those desktops, by the way, are on a lease throughout the district, whether they're in a lab or on a teacher's desk. Laptops, we don't own those laptops. They were all purchased individually by departments, by individual teachers through their departments, and except for the high school. They got a grant for 20 laptops. 10 went to the math department, 10 went to the English department. But again, it's a grant, so those are aging as we speak. The iMacs, the 13 iMacs that are at the high school, they are all out in the video production area, and they are now on a lease. What we've worked on over the last couple of years is to move them. Those were all donated devices, very old. They were 7 or 8 years old, and we brought them in underneath the technology budget so that we can have them refreshed. And then there's one iMac at Salisbury in the music department. And then there's that last row, iPads. Every single one of those iPads are purchased. They were donated, or the teachers got a grant, or the PTA purchased them. A lot of them are very, very old. And we'll see later on in another slide when we have that discussion about, do we really need iPads? And we talked about how they are possibly needed for the younger kids because of their, you know, the dexterity and the ease of use for certain apps. But they may not be needed in that quantity. multimedia devices. So as you can see, there's a theme here. You know, technology, my department, we take care of an awful lot of types of devices throughout the district, and that's what I'm trying to show here, is that there is a lot of different types of technology available for teachers and staff, and it's my department that maintains all of these. We have quite a few projectors, obviously. They're used in every classroom, and they're used every single day. We still have 32 non-mounted projectors throughout the district. We have smart boards. Every single one of those smart boards are purchased or were purchased. And they are aging, and they cause an awful lot of help desk tickets constantly because they go out of calibration. They're very, very old and very finicky. And as Pine Grove is renovating their building, we're taking those smart boards out of that building and repurposing them. And per the Rowley PTA, we're using them within the high school and the middle school for their students. So they are going in, I think there are 3 going into the high school this week. We're working with maintenance to get those put up. Document cameras, well, we do maintain them. There's not much to have to maintain with them, other than if a teacher calls up and they may have deleted the software off their desk, you know, we put it back on. But those just different types of devices that are available to the staff. Oops. Holding this microphone is crazy. Printers and copiers. Oh, Brian, our favorite subject.
Deb and I love talking about printers.
So we have 153 printers on desks throughout the district, and we have 90 of them on contract, and what that means is that their maintenance, toner, and per-click cost is paid by a contract that the district pays. And actually, it's a shared cost, I believe. That's a shared cost with the schools. And then we have 63 that are not on contract. And as each of these printers age and they're no longer being able to work on our network, the drivers are outdated, they're coming off the network. And if the teacher still wants one, then it's the schools that have been replenishing them. But we're trying to discourage that and encourage them to use the 38 copiers that we have leased and put strategically throughout the district for everyone to use. And those are on a lease. They have maintenance, toner, and per-click costs, and those are also shared with the district and each school. And what we also have on these, on the copiers with this latest lease is the full-blown paper cut. I remember, if you recall, last year we had put on the little first step paper cut to be able to do some reporting on printing, but not on copying. So with this new lease, they actually rolled in the full-blown paper cut for no money at all. And what that will allow us to do is now we can track how much each individual is printing and copying, and maybe as a district we can do some talking around saving some money. So, but yeah, my favorite subject.
Is anti-paper.
I am, and I had to print these, and I was so mad at myself.
So if I could just say one thing, so the way that they're shared between the district and the schools, and Michelle and I were talking about this to make sure we have this set up correctly, because the way it's billed, but the idea is that the district budget carries the cost of, say, the copiers, 39 copiers. We lease them $100 and some odd thousand for all the devices. The schools pick up the cost on a per-click basis for all the toner, and then they pay for their paper. So that way, if they want to cut their printing in half, that's all done on a per click. The maintenance, the toner, and the paper is by the ream. But so that's the way we've tried to strategize, is to say you can control your costs, and therefore you save money. And if that's in your local budget, then we can talk about spending in other ways.
Brian, just a question: how do each teacher have to push a code in?
So currently, no. So we're working on a solution that will actually, it's got an RFID. So by the end of this year, they'll literally walk over. So right now it's wide open, so there's no way to know. By the end of the year, they'll be able to, copying or printing, just be able to go swipe their card. So I'll press print, whatever device I go over to, and swipe my card, it comes out of that device. So.
Right. It's a great follow me, too. So you don't have to worry about which printer you just sent it to. You can, if I just sent it upstairs, or if Brian sent it from his office and he's running over to SES, so over to Salisbury for a meeting, and he forgot to print something, he can just swipe his badge over there, and any of their copiers and his print will be released. So hopefully that will cut down on a lot of the waste we find through all the copiers where teachers forget where they sent it, or they sent it to the wrong place, or they print it again, and there's a lot of waste.
I think it's not printing, and it's printed 7 times, but in another building.
Yeah, and it happens a lot.
Not by me.
Thank you for that clarification.
Just a quick question on that. That
Sure.
paper cut only works on the copiers, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Hence my goal to get rid of those printers on the desktops. But I understand for the younger class, for the younger kids, the teachers that have, K through 2, they probably need a printer on their desk. And you would think they would because they can't leave the classroom to go, they can't send a student or whatever. But you'll find out those are the ones that don't have the printers on the desk. It's mostly in the high school. Just saying. So the next slide, is on physical security. As Kim was talking about, security is a big topic, and technology is wrapped up in all of this as well. And door access. Well, we have a very old door access system that's in place in the 5 buildings, in the 4 buildings other than Pine Grove. They have a whole new system. But the rest of us have this old system that not even the vendor can maintain because it's so old and so outdated. And several times it has gone down to a point where their doors cannot be locked because the access system is broken. We're hoping to get it replaced with a different software upgrade because we found that the hardware can also remain, but it's the software that possibly could be changed. And you'll see that in my budget next week. So door access for physical for security, we put in the Raptor visitor management system. If you recall, we did that this fall. And I believe that's going pretty smoothly. We only had one problem with a printer had died. We just sent it back, got a replacement, and we were up and running. But it didn't stop that school because the way we placed it was there's a printer and a scanner at each of the secretary's desk. So even though one went down at an elementary school, they could just use the one at the next secretary's desk, right next to them. Surveillance cameras, as you know, we put in quite a few, but not enough. It was kind of like baby stepping into surveillance, the security piece. I did put into my budget for, you'll see next week, for an additional few more. It's nowhere near the amount that we actually need to put in proper security, but we're getting there. So you will see that. Come on. And the network, the big mystery behind the curtain, the stuff that makes everything run, make sure all your devices are working and we're all happy in tech land. This is the stuff that we have. Comcast, we have our 2 gigabyte fiber circuit here in this facility, 500 megabits at each of the elementary schools. Veeam software that we use to do our local data backup. For Wi-Fi, 5 controllers and 229 access points. Those access points are 1 per classroom and also in the common areas. We have a network monitor software that we use that monitors our infrastructure so we know uptime and performance monitoring. We look at those constantly to see if there's anything on the horizon that may signal that something's going to happen. So very important network monitoring software. We have 76 switches and we have servers, 8 physical and 50 virtual. And over the last couple of years, what we've been doing is we really focused on putting in the infrastructure, like getting that up to current standards. And it took a couple of years, took several years in the budget system to use leases, to use money wisely, to ensure that we had virtual servers and that we had good backup and that we had all of these things in place. So now the next step that we're looking at is to actually do for data protection and compliance. That's the next step that we need to look at. And that takes me to my next slide, and that's information security and compliance. We have, let's see if I have my notes correctly. CASB is Cloud Access Security Broker. It's a piece of software that kind of sits between us and every cloud out there, any other cloud services that we use. It makes sure that our security policies are also being done at their level, so that's in between. And also DLP, which is data loss prevention. Now, if you notice, I just want to take a step. Anything in red indicates software that we do not currently have. So at the top, the data loss prevention, which protects our sensitive data, we already have that in place. It's already being done. We catch things all the time. It prevents personally identifiable information getting out there, or any payment card information from being put out there. And what that means is credit card information, social security numbers, and you won't believe, or passwords. You know, here's how to log in, my ID and my password. It catches those things. And if there are documents that people are putting, especially in Google Drive, because we use that all the time, this system will catch that. And what it'll do is it'll pull it out. It'll take it out of the cloud, put it in a safe area locally. And then what happens, Matt will contact the person, let them know that he has their document in a safe area, and then tries to tell them how to safely put that somewhere. We actually, if I could, no names mentioned, but just recently, a staff member put all of their text documents in the Google Drive, in our Google Drive. And it was all their kids, their social security, their tax documents. So immediately it was flagged, it was pulled down, and unfortunately the response from that staff member was, "Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to put that in my personal Google Drive." They did not understand the big picture. And you know, we can only, as they say, take a horse to, water. Yeah. So we do try. So we do have software that tries to save it, so there's no passwords going out, no social security numbers, those kind of things. We also have antivirus and endpoint protection in place, preventing some malware and some nasty virus stuff. And we have our firewalls and our content filtering. It's very important that and those have been in place for many years, and we upgrade each year to the latest and greatest and make sure that it's catching all of the the bad stuff that's out there, to ensure that we are SIPA compliant. Now, we have all this in place, but we need to take it to the next level. For one thing, we do not have our website or any of our social media archived, and that really should be a requirement of any district-wide communication. So, a lot of teachers are using Facebook. They stream live Facebook, Twitter accounts. They're using all kinds of social media type things, including our website. So these need to be archived. The next thing is an advanced classroom content filtering. It's a product that's in my budget. It's called GoGuardian. It's the next level of SIPA compliance, because obviously we're doing that at the firewall, at the network end. We're trying to catch a lot of websites that people shouldn't be going to, and things like that. But what this is at the classroom level. So it allows the teacher to monitor for Chromebooks. So if they're in a classroom and all their students are on a Chromebook, the teacher looks at their Chromebook and has like a dashboard, so they can see all of the screens of all their students, and can see where, are they surfing the web, what sites are they going to, and they can prevent them from doing that, but they can also push certain websites out. So if they're in a classroom and they're supposed to be doing a particular lesson on a particular website, the teacher can push that out immediately, and everybody is locked into that and working right away. Again, as I said, that's a second level of SIPA compliance. And then with our shift to Google Drive, most of our it's become our primary means of data storage. So there is a lot of mission-critical data that's in Google Drive, and we are not backing that up. So it's really important that we do. Gmail is backed up, but none of the documents and all that's stored in Google Drive. None of that is backed up. And the more we use Team Drives, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Team Drives in Google Drive. It's a wonderful new feature that they added 2 years ago. And the district has been using it quite a bit. So what happens with Team Drives, as you know, everybody in that team owns those documents. So if, for instance, a grade 3 team puts all of their curriculum and their atlas mapping and whatever they have in there and their worksheets and their for the whole year, they may not see if one member deletes something by accident. They may not see that for a couple of months because they're not at that point yet to be able to use it. But now they're past that 30-day window, because it's usually if you delete something in Google, it lasts about 30 days and you can pull it out of trash. But after that, it's permanently deleted. So we've already had a few instances where people have said, oh my goodness, where is my stuff? And we can't get that back. So really think this is a very important piece of software that we really need to implement. And lastly, we need to address the human element of protecting systems and data by providing ongoing information and cybersecurity training. Because as we know, it's the human who is the weakest link in security. We can put all of these software programs in place and we can do all kinds of things like that. But if you have staff and people who leave sticky notes on their computer with their password and their login, or leave their computer logged in and they leave the room, and it happens. We have students doing that here in the lab all the time. They just walk away. And another kid will sit down and start using their program, and they come crying to us that somebody's ruining their documents or whatever, but they left themselves logged in. So that is, and with training, with trying to get people to understand the importance of information security. Hopefully, we won't be losing a lot of information. So it's a program called Know Before, and it's a very good product. Communication, we use ConnectEd. You all know we use ConnectEd, and that's another product that we support in IT. It's a district-wide parent and community messaging system, but there's also a product that's becoming more widely used, mostly in the high school. It's called Remind. And they're using the free version of Remind. So the importance is it's a mobile device. Kids live on their phones. Parents live on their phones. And what this product does, the free version, and actually the paid version too, but the free version that they're using now, they use it to remind the students about upcoming tests or projects or whatever it is. But it is a communication between the student and the teacher, but also with parents, because the teacher can communicate to the parent as well. It's the free version. The free version does not have archiving, and it really is important that we archive any communication between the teachers and the students. And the paid version of Remind will do that. And it's a very good product. It's something that I've talked about, that perhaps that's something we need to look at, because there's lots of, with technology, there are so many different apps and so many different ways of communicating with your student, with the student from a teacher's point of view, and they're all trying them, and they're all using them. I know I don't know a lot of what they're using out there, and I need to dig down and take a survey and get an understanding and pull that together. And perhaps that's when we see that we have something like Remind, and make that a district communication platform so that we can all have it archived and have the same platform. Oops. Oh yes, and there's more. More things that we support is the voice over IP phone system. I won't read all of these together, but we do support an awful lot, including the reporting with the SIMs 3 times a year, and the EPIMS, which is the staff data, twice a year, and the federal civil rights data collection. There's a lot of reporting that we do. We support a lot of systems, and that's just a few of them. And there's a lot of technology that I don't think a lot of people understand that goes on. But my last slide, we'll talk about our needs. I'd like to talk about the bottom piece first, and this is kind of like 2 slides ago when I talked about data protection, the G Suite backup. I believe we really need to have that in. Same thing with the district-wide training, infosecurity training, the website and the social media archiving, and that Go Guardian, which is the advanced content classroom filtering, as you know, kind of behind the scenes kind of things. But at the top, devices. This goes back to my earlier slides on Chromebooks and iPads. In my budget, you will see I put in 450 iPads. We just ballparked it at 5 iPads per classroom, and it's only 5 for K through 2 because those little ones do need those. Chromebooks. To bring equity at this point in time, with the purchased ones, with the leased ones, just a snapshot in time, to bring us to a 2-to-1 in all 5 schools, we would need 165 Chromebooks and 4 carts. Now, 4 carts are not 4 carts with Chromebooks in them. It's 4 empty carts. A couple of those carts will have like 30 of them in there, but the other, the 165 will be divided out into the different schools. You know, like put 7 into a cart here and 8 into another cart over there. That, you know, hopefully will bring us to 2-to-1 as we stand right now. You know, next month it'll be less because they die a lot. But that brings us to what is known as the politics of our Chromebook inventory. This is the sticky part right here. First of all, none of our Chromebook inventory is owned by the district. It's privately purchased or leased via the PTA, the Triton Education Fund, Donors Choose, or the departments themselves. So the district doesn't have them to be able to divide them out equitably. So the big question is, how do we redistribute them to be more equitable? It's a big question. I don't know if it's for another night.
Deb's looking at me, so I'll take this off because I know she's squirming. So the reality is, if we funded a 2-to-1 initiative, say we had 150,000 in the budget and we leased 10 carts per school, 12, 15, 13 carts per school, whatever that number is, and we allocated them as carts for a school, and then they're shared, people sign them out. At that point, it would basically be 1 cart for every 2 classrooms. But what has happened in the absence of that setup is departments have used, so take the high school, the history department may say, you know what, in my supplies and materials money, we can squeak out whatever the money might be, $2,000 a year out of our department funds to get a Chromebook cart. But then they're giving up supply and material funds, so then when it comes time for someone else to need the Chromebooks, well, they're saying, well, no, they're used in our history classes. So it's not to say that the district doesn't own them. We own all of the devices, even a donation. If a donation is made through a PTA or Triton Education Foundation, as soon as they make that donation to the district, it's under the purview of the committee. But there's politics involved in saying if, for example, the Pine Grove PTA purchased smart boards at Pine Grove School. They put 1 smart board in every classroom at Pine Grove School. Those are still okay. So those are now being taken down in the building project. So where did those, there was 30 originally, there's not that many left now. But sure, we could just say to the PTA, they're ours now, but to maintain a good working relationship with our PTAs and our support groups, we need to say, okay, so what are your thoughts on how we redistribute these, since, you know, there's a lot of you have been parts of PTAs and you dedicate lots of hours, and there's always a small group of people that go out and raise the funds and figure out how to get it done. So that's what we mean when we say the politics of. Had we purchased these directly, district-wide, uniformly, it's easy. We reallocate them. Anytime we have dedicated district and school allocated funds, we have had them and put them in as school-based carts, so they're shared. But in the absence of a district-wide strategy and funding, teachers have been resourceful, which is great. But it's not as simple, we're just going to collect them all, because there was a lot of personal investment in how those came to be. Doesn't mean it can't be done. We're not saying you don't have the authority as the committee. It's just a sticky discussion. So, was that the end? Did I get the final word? Oh, perfect. Good answer. Yeah, so then the discussion of in the primary classrooms, Chromebooks are obviously a third. You know, an iPad is 2.5 to 3 times the cost of a Chromebook, but there definitely is still an application or a use, an applied use for iPads at the primary level. And music in kindergarten and primary classrooms, touch screens, they're not doing as much word processing, so that discussion is happening. But again, when we go down that road, we want to go down the road not where we are now with, what, 91 iPads, 110 iPads, where they've been bought piecemeal in trying to manage iPads that need to see a network to be able to do updates, but it can't touch the network because it's out of date and it's out of compliance, so it's a security risk. We land back here very quickly if we don't have a strategic, systemic approach. So I don't want to take all the credit. So thank you both for that detailed information.
Thank you. I see a lot of questions, so I'm going to start at the end, and we'll just work our way around. Jim's good?
I'm fine.
Paul, you're next.
Nicely done.
So Deb, this is just a question I have about the notion of website archives.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with a website called the Wayback Machine? I know it sounds silly.
No.
No? Well, I had a case years ago, and I had to do some research. And the name of the website is the Wayback Machine. And you can literally go on and type it in, and it'll bring up every website that's ever been put up. So the Deb Jones first version is up, the Deb Jones second version, and on and on and on. So just throw that out
within
there.
a domain, yeah. Yeah, so you can find all the old Triton.info sites. You can find the first TRSD.net sites. Not quite archiving, but a really fun tool. Yeah.
Anything else, Paul? Tina? No? Linda?
Has there been any discussion on one-to-one Chromebooks?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we want to do it. I mean, literally, yes. We would love to be at a one-to-one. I don't know. I'm still not convinced that students bringing devices home, that's still, I know that gets problematic when they're district-owned and students go back and forth with them. That can be very costly because things happen. But to be at a one-to-one for the 7 hours, 6.5 hours a day they're here, to say every classroom has a cart, mobile, whatever the number is, and has access to those, absolutely, absolutely.
No, but there's many districts that have the parents buy the Chromebooks.
We've thought about that one, too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we did look into that. We were talking, what was it, last year, maybe the year before? I think when Tim was here. We were going to use the 9th grade as a pilot and have, the parents would bring them in, and the ones that we have here, we could just give them for the students who couldn't buy them.
Right.
But the big discussion was the 9th grade, well, it wasn't just the 9th grade class, but it was, we were just getting into Google Suite. So it was, and Brian had a very good point of what are they going to use these for? Are we purchasing all of these and having the parents, and what are they going to do with them?
Yeah, so I may or may not be speaking as a parent, but if I'm told as a parent that you need to buy a Chromebook because we're going to use this all the time in class, and you go out and spend $250, and then it's used every once in a while, or it's in your daughter's room all the time because she never is asked to bring it to school. It's a great resource at home, but I was very happy to buy it, but I can't say that for everyone. That might be a real stretch for a parent, and if we're going to say you need it, and then we're not trained and teachers aren't ready and prepared to say, I need you to have it in class every day. Not every class, but if a student has a schedule of 7 courses, 6 courses, at least once a day there should be a class they're cycling through where their teacher's requiring them to use it. So yes, but, so that's a solution, but that's there's a lot of work to get there.
Right.
And then there's still a significant cost because if we're then we're saying it's required. A student who can't afford it, we have to provide it for them. So that then we get into fees and collecting fees and waivers. So it's possible, but most districts that have gone down that road have quickly slid to, you know what, this is just a whole lot easier if we believe in one-to-one to just find a way to fund it. So we believe in leases. I know I believe in leases. So if it doesn't have a heartbeat, we lease it. So at that rate, it's not, so we have 2,600 students. That's not a ridiculous number when we're talking Chromebooks. You know, so if that number was a couple $100,000, off the top, if it was probably $250,000, 250,000, that would probably get us pretty close to a one-to-one on a lease for a Chromebook that would refresh that device every 3 years. We don't have to worry about maintenance because that's all part of the lease. But I would say we need to get to the point where we can fund that before we get to one-to-one. So there's also, I will say, Triton Education Foundation has big visions and dreams about becoming a more sustainable funding source. So they would like to be where the Newburyport Education Foundation is, where they've got folks, businesses who just donate, just write that check every year. And they've got reserves and they've got endowments, I don't know if they have endowments, but where they can be sustainable and become the funding for technology in the district, where they would be able to say, we can commit to $100,000 a year, at least in 3-year increments, and be prepared to be the Chromebook people. So I know they have that as a goal of being able to fund someday a 2-to-1 ratio, which would then dissolve all of the leases, try and roll them. But again, this politics. PTA's bought some. What do we do with them? How do we deal with that? But that would be a fun bridge to cross if we got to the point where TEF said, we can commit to you for $150,000 a year.
When we go to full MCAS on the computer, do you have enough for the middle school? Because I know that was where it was lacking last.
We do. We are there. Yep. Actually, the middle school, we funded a cart, and then the institution, I can't remember who the funding source is. We started a lease of 2 new carts, and then the institution had funded 2.
Yeah, the Triton Education Fund, 25 units.
Okay.
And Al has it in his budget for, I believe it's 60.
So 2 of 4 carts.
Yeah, and then the other carts are purchased, so and they're aging.
Yeah. So as to Deb's point, so right now, yes, we're there, but with only, forget the numbers, but roughly half of them leased versus half of them purchased. The purchased ones are going to start to fall off.
And they are.
But as of right now, as of this year, we are doing MCAS in the spring, except for 10th grade. We are doing MCAS.
Mm-hmm.
Doing MCAS. Students are taking the MCAS online. We're doing it. We're doing it. They are doing it. They're taking it online as well. Okay.
Yes, they are. And because of the schedule, they're not all taking it on the same day. So you have your 3rd grade, the window. Yeah. So.
Kim, can you use a mic, please? Thank you.
Here. Take 3. They have a larger testing window to support schools who do not have a 1-to-1 ratio of student to device. So we've already worked out the schedule, and we don't have a problem at this point with the MCAS assessment.
Okay, one last question. Yep. When you say about the staff having posting notes for passwords, I'm sure you know about it, but they have a thing called KeyPass that they're able to store different passwords.
The OnePass?
It's called KeyPass.
Well, we don't use that, but we are also looking at single sign-on, so that once a staff member signs in, that they don't have to have all those stickies for all the different websites and passwords and things like that. We're not there yet, but maybe even just to get to that one spot, we could use something like that. But
we use it at work because we have 18 different passwords, and all you have to remember is one login, and then you can get to the key password.
Get to the whole thing, yeah.
And is that on the computer, or is that like an app?
No, it's an app that you can get on the computer.
On the computer itself, not on the...
Yes. You can have it on your phone. You can have it on any device that you want.
Gotcha.
I have it on my phone, on my iPad, on my computer.
Microphone. Paul?
I have questions for next week during the budget, but I want to say everything that you put together tonight looks really good, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for listening.
This is probably a question for Kim, and it kind of ties into part of that conversation. And this would just be an estimate. You showed us the numbers, the access, the percentage of what students have access to devices. Okay. Do you have any estimate of how many students in the district don't have access at home?
I don't, but that actually came up a few times in the written responses from teachers where they have asked students to do work at home and they did not have a device at home that they could use other than a parent's cell phone or something that they couldn't use. So there were absolutely some concerns from staff about parents not having access to either a device or some type of internet connection.
Right, I'm not suggesting we provide a computer for them. That's not at all. I just wanted to remind everybody that situation exists more than any of us might realize.
And sometimes the students won't share that information, especially as they get into the middle and high school. They would rather not do their homework and just pretend that they didn't do their homework than...
I would say most times that's the case.
Yeah, yep. And so the goal is not to put them in that type of situation. Yeah.
Maureen? Dina?
I am so glad that the security thing came up again tonight, because I've mentioned before when we went to the conference in November, I did attend one seminar that scared the life out of me. So I will be asking questions next week. I'm sure, Deb, you're already prepared for the Know Before program, because that's one that they did mention that they said was excellent to be using, because, as you said, we're all human. We all do silly things sometimes, use the same password for almost everything. So the education piece is huge. So I'm hoping that that's included next week.
Good. It will be.
And I will thank you as well for coming tonight, because I found this tremendously informative. I have a couple of questions too. So one of the things I loved about this presentation is it kind of gives us the big picture, because I feel in budget presentations, like it's been a little bit here, a little bit there. Can you find some way to sort of, now that you've kind of communicated your big goals, to tie those into the budget presentation? It looks like a lot of these will just be listed probably in the budget presentation, but it's nice to know, you know, if you feel like getting to the 2 to 1 or 1 to 2, depending on how you want to look at it, isn't something that you can put forward in a budget presentation this time, can you kind of give us a gauge on where we're at on that as you're giving your budget presentations and as we're talking about these different things? Because it's really nice to know, if you, all these times when you have these big goals in front of you, kind of where you're at progress-wise. And now that we know that that goal is in front of us, I'd love to know what our levels of progress toward meeting that goal are, if that makes sense. Sorry, Dina.
Can I just add on to that too? Years ago, we had a technology plan. I don't even know if we have one that is current, or if it is, it's probably...
Please don't bring up the technology plan. So we were just talking about that, yes.
Yes.
So that was a request. So I would say even more than the budget, budget's a good time to have that discussion.
Right.
But is it a 15 to 19, I think is the last iteration, or it's a 5-year, but it was
goes
written,
obsolete within 6 months of it being written.
Right. So now it's a matter of resurrecting that as a vehicle for accountability, so that we don't put it out there and we're not able to fund it, so we just stop making an effort, versus saying, no, every year we're going to do the technology plan, we're going to review it, and if we set a goal and we can't fund it, then we identify that, adjust the plan and say, okay, we're waiting 1 year and we're coming right back at this again next year. But yeah, that is a need.
And can I just mention too, as Chrome carts come in, sometimes I don't even know who's getting a Chrome cart. So again, this was a really good exercise for us, because people are being very resourceful within their own schools, finding different funding source. So prior to this, we didn't know how many new Chrome carts were being put out there. I mean, so again, having that information, I think for me, I was actually surprised at, over the last course of maybe the last 2 years, how many Chrome carts actually came into the school. Yeah. Now, where they go, and to speak to what Brian had said, it wasn't done in kind of a priority list of, okay, English teachers are going to be using probably the Chromebooks the most, so let's make sure that it was kind of splattered a little bit throughout. And I think having a plan and set goals and targets is going to eliminate some of those politics that could end up kind of becoming a little bit complicated.
Because this past fall, the high school, I think they got 4 Chrome carts, and it was all of them going to Triton Education Fund with, I need this, and getting pushed back a little bit, but it raised the need. And so then they were asking me, well, how much is it going to cost, Deb? And so I would give them quotes, and then they looked in their own budgets, and they said, oh, well, we can do this. And then Triton Education Fund, in the case of the foreign language department, purchased the cart, just the cart itself, and then the foreign language department leased their Chromebooks. So they were getting creative, but they were all just so excited, and they were like, oh my gosh, this is so doable. This is not a lot of money. So like Brian was saying, that they would use their textbook money or whatever resource money that they had, and they would put it towards a lease. But it doesn't make it it doesn't make it equitable, because I was talking to a science teacher, and she feels like her hands are tied because their money for supplies and textbooks goes to science stuff that they go through all the time, real resources that get used. They don't have the luxury of saying, well, we won't use a textbook, we'll get Chromebooks. So they felt that their students really needed them, but they didn't have the money. So it's really kind of messy.
I have a Kim question too. So, correct me if I'm wrong on my timeline again here. 3 years ago, we had 3 technology teachers, 1 in each of the elementary schools. 2 years ago.
Middle school.
In the middle school?
Yeah,
Okay.
1 in the middle.
2 years ago, we went to 1 technology teacher, I believe, right?
17, yep.
Okay. And then we folded technology into the library media specialists, but we gave them a halftime aide. And then this past year, I know at least Pine Grove's halftime aide was part of the cuts. Can we talk about how these students are getting trained on technology? Because that hunt and peck student is what I am afraid is happening more and more often. I see students having a 4th grader. I see 3rd graders and 4th graders who are very adept on a touch screen, but you put a keyboard in front of them and it just slows to a crawl. And my worry with them starting to take MCAS and have, I guess, the more interaction and more responsibility in the classroom is I'm wondering where that actual use instruction, the keyboarding and things like that is coming in, and how uniform, I believe the classroom teachers are taking on at least some of that. How uniform is that across classrooms and across schools?
So there are technology literacy standards that actually speak to how do we use this tool, what type of apps, what type of additional, like I think of the highlighting tool and all of those pieces that allow kids to interact on this keyboard, word processing, if you would, at a higher level. And so some of those are already ingrained in the curriculum or the lessons. And I can tell you, even just with getting students prepared for the MCAS, that actually, the good news about that is we have, in a very strategic way, taught the kids how to use those pieces on the Chromebook. So that was something that uniformly we did. It was driven by the assessment testing, but it is going across all levels. I would say the biggest obstacle is we have the media teachers who are spread out very thin, and they just actually sent me a documentation that has all of the 3rd grade how many words per minute typing tests that they do. And I was looking at some of them, and they weren't even in the double digits yet. And again, going back to this, the problem with that is that problem is not going to be solved with them having an additional teacher. The problem is going to be solved when they have more time practicing that. So even if it's 5 or 10 minutes a day, they have to have a device in front of them. An extra, I'm not saying that we don't need a media specialist, but for that particular area, the way the kids are becoming masters in that skill work is that they're practicing every day. And for them to practice every day, they need to have a Chromebook in front of them, not once a week when it's signed out. So those skills are not going to become solid until they have that regular access to a computer. And the media specialists, they are loaded with different things, and they are really trying their best to get these kids up where they need to be as far as their literacy, their computer literacy skills. But it's challenging, right? They're spread very thin, and the teachers are being asked to kind of fill in and make those adjustments. And a lot of it does happen organically when they're interfacing with a lot of this stuff. And the other piece I want to say is when we first rolled out the assessment online, the kids were actually in this 4th grade class more comfortable with showing the teacher how to use the different tools, and the teachers were more anxious about it. So that I am concerned more about the keyboarding, because some of them already pick up bad habits even before 3rd grade, right? They've already got this thing going on, and I don't even know how it works. But yeah, so that is a great question, but we are seeing that they need more access and more time with the technology component, literacy, as well as the devices.
Can you give me an idea, if you have one, of the breakdown between what that the technology specialists that were previously covering or are part of the standards are currently being covered in the media session, and what's being covered in the classroom?
So I would, you think about, I know one of the big things was the safety, how kids interact with the computer, the safety about Facebook and all of those type of pieces. That was they always did a big unit on that prior to them being cut. So I know that was covered, which was huge, because again, we see kids at the middle school getting in so much trouble when they think that they're texting to one person. They don't realize what the implications could be. So again, just using it in a way that is smart and is safe, that was a big piece of the instructional components of the computer teacher, as well as they would do spreadsheets and different things in I want to say Microsoft Word, Excel, and getting them to use those spreadsheets. So when they're at the middle school and high school, they already have that skill set, and it doesn't hold them up from doing certain things. So it's to that level, and they certainly are not there. Like there's just no time, and the teachers themselves are working through platforms such as Math in Focus or Inspire, and they're just trying to get used to that platform as opposed to really settling in and trying to pull it all in. So yeah, there's a lot for them to learn, and they are limited in what they are exposed to now regarding computer literacy skills.
The best bang for the buck would be to get us to a 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 ratio, reinstate the technology specialists, but don't have them be where they were they're coming to the lab,
I was just
but
gonna
they
say,
become a coach.
Oh yeah,
So they
I was
become
thinking that.
they're
Yeah,
out
absolutely.
in the classrooms.
No.
Because it happens organically
Absolutely.
when they're learning in context, when I'm in history and I'm
Yep.
just keyboarding, not learning to keyboard, but I'm keyboarding. And so to have that person
Yep.
who's skilled at infusing technology into the instructional day, that's where the bang would be.
And I would even say when we tried that model with sharing that one between, that was almost impossible. It was
But
spread to.
it was great.
Yeah.
It just wasn't enough. That
That's
was
what I'm
what we
saying.
had,
Like
right.
the model is fabulous, but it wasn't enough. Yeah, without a doubt.
Can you just talk about consistency? Because that's another one of my, is if some of this is, or a lot of this is happening organically, is it consistent across a grade, and is it consistent across the school? And I think, be most concerned about grades 3 through 5, because I feel like hopefully they have the skills at the end of 5th grade to really, be at a level where they really need to function independently of a teacher and be assigned something. And
You know what? That's a great question. I don't have the data, and I don't want to make up anything. I want to be true with my response. I don't know. I only hear the needs. I have not heard that as being a need. I heard the keyboarding definitely being a need. I hear the safety issues about students not being responsible with technology as a concern. As far as using tools to highlight, drag and drop, create Excel files, I have not received any feedback. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just haven't heard anything. I can certainly look into that to say these are the standards, obviously, that we need to make sure our students have at each grade level. Which ones of these are being addressed and to what extent, and kind of doing an inventory and then see where we are.
yeah, I'd be interested to
Yeah.
know how many days they're having access to them too, because if you have students who are getting essentially keyboarding practice, 3 days a week for 20 minutes at a time, and another classroom that is not seeing it at all, I wonder not to go
Yeah.
back to the assessments, but
What's that going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. No.
all right, any other questions before we move on?
Can I say one
Brian's
last
got
thing?
some last word.
Oh, it doesn't need to be, someone else can say something, but just back to the part at the beginning when the microphones weren't working.
Yeah.
So just while we're talking about technology, the Newbury cable committee. The town committee is dealing with a new cable contract through Comcast. Salisbury, I believe, did it last year. Salisbury has an access studio, has an organization, has been looking to contribute funds with Rowley and Newbury to replace this equipment. So there's discussions, but I think we need to have a backup plan because the cost is about $30,000 to replace the microphones and the device that Jonathan's sitting in front of back there that does all the videoing and mixing and the TriCaster. It's about $30,000 for that process or for those components, and then another $8,000 to $10,000 to replace the cameras to be ready for kind of the next generation. But I think a third of these microphones are on now banned FCC channels. 3 of them are dead channels. So it's just poor Mr. Lathrop is running around trying to make these things work, but he's working with faulty equipment. So this is not an issue of skill set on our folks, but this is something we're going to have to address sooner rather than later.
Comcast won't fund those for you?
So the beauty of a region is that it funds each of the towns. So then it's a matter of the towns having to agree to put the money towards this. So Newbury is in the midst of it. Salisbury has its own cable access, and so it's always been, with Lance, has always had a much more finely tuned machine. And in Rowley, they have Comcast and Verizon competing. So whether we talk about how those channels, but Newbury would love to see us take over their education channel and produce programming, and we'd be willing to have the discussion, but we would have to do it universally. So that's where that has generally broken down in my 14-year experience here.
Paul, did you have a? Paul is thinking.
Isn't a portion of that money from or the bills that we pay to Comcast, isn't that supposed to come back to educational purposes within the town? So
regardless of the contract, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
There is it's PEG, Public, Educational, and Government. So there's supposed to be a public channel, which is anyone could go in and produce a show, an educational channel, which is 24/7 educational content, and government, which carries the towns. So yes, that is truth.
Deb?
Well, I was involved in the preliminary negotiations in Salisbury last year, and yeah, but you could get more. You can definitely get more in the negotiations because it's minimal.
Yeah.
That's required, but
so it's for those purposes.
Yeah, but I don't know where. So I don't know where Newbury is in this, but you can really hold Comcast's feet to the fire if you want to.
Take that as a quote.
That is a rat's nest.
All right. Any other comments or questions before we leave this topic? Excellent.
Thank you, Kim and Deb.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
It was a long one, but it was good. School committee goal follow-up. This is the updates on any meetings that you may have attended as part of advocacy goal number 2, or anything else that may come up as regard to school committee goals. Anybody? Oh, Dina.
I attended the Newbury Finance Committee meeting last night. They just had their routine business, but the topic of our budget did come up. So I took advantage of that and reminded them of our budget presentations next week and invited them all to come. Did give them the correct times because I almost made the same mistake too, about 7 o'clock. But I did look it up, and so they have the correct dates and times. So hopefully some of them will be here.
That's terrific. Anybody else? Deb?
I and a few others went to the National Honor Society induction, also went to the Christmas concert, and I attended the December meeting of the Tempo, the Triton Music, the Performing Arts Parents Organization, which was a wonderfully positive group. Small, but wonderfully positive. And just the only budget implication that came out of that meeting was that the numbers of students, particularly in Salisbury, who are able to play a musical instrument is dropping drastically because they don't have the funding to, but the parents can't afford to pay for the instruments. So one suggestion that came up. They were looking to apply to Walmart, which gives grants, and it has to be a financial need. So that was just a possibility that they were looking into. But very positive experience at that meeting.
All right. Item D, the MASC Regional Schools Report, which I don't think you've had a meeting, so
Have not.
no report,
No
I assume.
report.
Okay. Item E, student enrollment, updated NSDEC projections.
Yes, so I'm going to go through this quickly. You have there's 4 packets, 4 stapled packets in your packet. And I want to look at the graph. It's on page 67, 75, 83, and 91 in each of the little packets. 67, the graph that looks like this. 67, 75, 83 for Salisbury, and then 91 for the district. So while you're looking, just some background, we are a member of NSDEC, the New England School Development Council. As a part of that service, they give us access to some services. One of those is enrollment trends. They're generally fairly accurate. Some would argue that they're not extremely accurate, but it's a tool that provides us a snapshot. About 5 years ago, we had that year showed a 10-year downward trend and had us at the time we were about 2,800 and change, and had us to close to 2,100 as a district over the next decade. So we've now gone through 4 to 5 years of that trajectory. And if you look at page 91, which is the district, you can see it has the last 10 years, 2008 to 2018, and then models out the next 10 years. So it's important to note, there's actually a correction since we discussed this with the Finance Subcommittee, because there's a note on the first page of each of these reports that says, note, students registered as of October 1 as per DESE SIMS regulations. So the last note said that it was only students that, basically, I forget the exact word, but that a town owns, similar to foundation enrollment. The reality is this report shows all students that we're responsible for. So that means any student who is in Triton as a school choice student, we're responsible for them. We're going to get money from another city or town, but as far as our enrollments, we can't reject their enrollment. If you accept a kindergartner, they have a right by state law to graduate as a senior. So this includes all students who are in our schools now and who are entitled to finish our school. So this is yet one more way of counting student enrollment. Can't equate it to foundation enrollment, can't equate it to perfect head count. So it's all students in our schools that we're responsible for. So on page 91, the key takeaway here is we're starting to level out where we were going to, it had us decreasing for another 5 years. I wouldn't say precipitously, but pretty steadily. You can see that over the next 10 years, we're projected to slow down that decrease. Originally, it had us below 2,200. Now we're at 2,309. Again, those haven't followed complete suit. This assumes, obviously, the past data is far more accurate than the predictable data or the prediction data. It's based on birth counts. I think it's the survival cohort method is the method they use if you're a statistician. So it is a reliable methodology, but it can't assume house sales, it can't assume changes in birth rates, it can't assume changes in the economy that may justify new house sales or a downturn that would have an adverse effect. So just to note out of all this, and certainly I'm happy to answer questions as best I can, it's important to note that we're leveling off a little more. And then if you look at 67, 75, and 83, which is Newbury, Rowley, and Salisbury, you can see that Newbury actually is going to take a slight uptick. Again, we're talking small numbers here. But whereas Rowley and Salisbury continue to decrease over the next 10 years, Newbury is going to reverse that a little bit. So again, we're not talking hundreds of students, but That is a slightly different trend than we've seen in the past years. So I just wanted to provide this information to you. We talked about it at Finance Subcommittee and thought it was worth at least taking 5 minutes to just call it out, not just tucked in the finance agenda, but just to put this out there and answer any questions, any thoughts, because it obviously has implications for the budget for the future.
Just one quick question. Just how many students roughly go out of district and how many come in?
For choice?
Yeah.
Do I have those numbers in my report? So it's roughly twice as many out than in.
Twice as many
Not quite now. So we have 84 out and 131. I think 131 in.
That's consistent with the.
For choice. Yeah. Yeah, at one point we were 257 out and 103 in. So that's reversed, and I will talk about in my report that we saw in my mind, a very concerning trend and an uptick for the first time in a decade that we'll talk about in a second.
Any other questions on the NASDAQ reports before we move on? Okay, and I'm just going to note that I'm intending to include this in the DCC meeting for January 31st as well, because despite the fact that we're, discussing it here, I believe that all of our towns should be aware of the data that we have in relation to their potential student counts as well. All right, monthly report of the superintendent of schools, please.
Yes. So you have a copy of this in front of you, and I'm going to go through it quickly, but if you will indulge me, I'd like to read the first note. So this was the passing of a dedicated Triton educator. As calendar year 2018 came to a close, we lost a gifted educator and dedicated servant to the students and families of Salisbury Elementary School. Sandra Foley was in her 20th year of service to the district, initially hired in 1999 as an instructional assistant before quickly moving into the role of classroom teacher in 2001. As Principal Jim Montanari so nicely stated in a message to the SES community, Ms. Foley was a generous and honest person who contributed greatly to the success of SES. Sandy leaves a legacy of service to hundreds of children and families who pass through her classroom. As a resident of Salisbury Beach, Sandy enjoyed daily walks with her dogs, a routine friends and neighbors knew well. On Sunday, December 23rd, Sandy was walking her dogs on Salisbury Beach when she collapsed, suffering a brain aneurysm. She passed away on Wednesday, December 26, 2018. Arrangements were limited to family and friends, and a celebration of life was held at her home on Sunday, December 30th. This is obviously a very emotional time for everyone who knew Sandy and for the entire Salisbury Elementary community. Let's keep them all in our thoughts and prayers in the coming days and weeks as students and teachers return to their school routines and mourn her loss together. So I'd appreciate it if we could actually have a moment of silence as well. Thank you.
Can I just make a note, too,
Absolutely.
that I sent an arrangement on behalf of the school committee to Sandy's family.
Thank you. And just to provide an update, I've heard from several folks who have said Salisbury Elementary, everyone there, Mr. Montanari on through all the supports in place, did a fabulous job. The first day it was touch and go, and it seems to have settled in. Lots of support. The building was opened on Monday, the 30th, right? The 30th. And families and students did take advantage of that. But it was obviously very hard for a lot of the staff who were very close to her, and some of the students who were in her classroom and knew her well. But as a school, I just want to thank everyone who was involved because they made it as good as it could be in a really tough situation. So thank you to all of them. So as I mentioned moments ago, in regards to school choice, so this is for the first time. If I just take you to the graph at the bottom that shows FY 10, so the 2009-10 year through the current year, the red is students being sent out, the blue is students coming in. So we have had, since 2010, a very positive trend. We have been reducing the number of students who are leaving the district and increasing the number of students who are coming into the district. Over most recent years, we very strategically started to reduce the number of students we were accepting on school choice. We went from having it be a major revenue draw to a major revenue source. And I would suggest we were overly reliant on it because it's not a reliable funding source because things change. So we very strategically in recent years have accepted fewer students on choice in. In my mind, and I think Michelle and I agree, in my mind, the perfect balance is when we net off our losses with revenues, that we don't depend on it as a recurring revenue source because it's so unpredictable, but that we're always making sure that we're at least covering those families that do choose to leave with students coming in. So we were aware that we would have a downturn in the number of new school choice students coming in. We accepted fewer across the board. Literally K through 12 now. There was a time when Newbury Elementary was the only place where students were choicing into. Now we were denied, I don't know if we denied any applications to Salisbury, but we've had choice applications in Salisbury, Newbury, Pine Grove, the middle school, and the high school. But for the first time this year, we saw, besides the known and expected dip in the number of choice in, we saw a marked increase in the number of students choicing out. So as of June of 18, this past June, we had 56.9 students leaving the district. As of October 1st, we have 84 students leaving the district. So that increase, I'm digging into. As I said, that is very concerning to me. I want to know why, and I'm going to find out why because I'm going to talk to parents. So I can tell you that Patty just finished this today, digging through each student and their history and where they were and where they've come from. So I can tell you of that, it's currently 83. And I will say this, there are some names on the lists. This was an October 1 count. We know there's already one who has re-enrolled. I talked to a parent yesterday of a freshman who choiced out to Newburyport this year and has already said, you know what, he wants to come back. So there will be changes. This is an October 1 count. We do Sims October, March, and June, right? So when the June numbers are taken, those will be readjusted. There could be more students going out. There could be more students coming in. But I know there will be several students returning. Another big change, and you don't see it on your list, is you've heard of TECA Academy. I think I've spoken about the fact that the superintendent is in my NISIP cohort. We last year, at the beginning of the year, had 4 students attending virtual high schools. So there's one student at Greenfield Academy and then the majority at TECA. We currently have 14. So that is an appropriate education for some students. But now that program is considered school choice through the state, parents are able to make the choice when it's not in the best interest of their child. We don't believe that the majority of these kids belong there. As I said, there are absolutely times when it's appropriate. However, the parents make the choice and we get the bill just like school choice. The frustrating part is that for school choice bill, we get a bill for $5,000, and for the virtual academies, we get a bill for $8,265. So there's a justified, similar to charter, there's an extra $3,265 in there because it's technology, not quite sure. So from that information, we broke it down into where students were last year. So I can tell you that of these students that are out, 51 of them were choiced out last year. They were choiced out. I've had discussions with parents and I've said, look, you've been choiced out for 8 years. Don't bring your student back, please. That's not best for him or her, when they're close to graduation. So 51 choiced out and were choiced out last year. There were 13 students who did not exist as a Triton resident last year. So I can tell you there's one family who is currently choiced out to Ipswich and lives in Rowley. So I haven't fully dissected this yet, but I can tell you absolutely what happened is they've been in Ipswich their entire life. They moved into Rowley, and Ipswich said, sure, we'll keep you here, finish your schooling here. We do that all the time. I can't blame Ipswich. But 13 of those are something we could not have controlled. However, in that list, there are 19 students who were enrolled in Triton schools last year and chose this year to choice out. 8 of them are freshmen. 2 went to Georgetown, 3 went to Newburyport, 1 went to Hamilton Wenham, 1 went to Ipswich, and 1 went to TECA Academy. So I'm going to be reaching out to each of these families, not in a hostile way, obviously, but to learn what the reason is for their decision to leave. As I said in my final statement there, I will report in more detail as the budget process develops, as this has implications for future planning and may indeed be the result of recent budgetary decisions. So I'm not going to jump to any conclusions, but as we've made changes, parents are noticing, we keep saying, people are going to start, they're going to start choosing with their feet. And my fear is that's starting to happen. So I don't know if there's specific questions about this before I finish the rest of the report. But.
Yeah, Dina?
As I recall, years ago when we first saw the mass exodus, mostly from Raleigh towards Ipswich, we were supposed to be doing kind of exit interviews, similar to what you're talking about doing now, talking to parents as to why they're leaving or whatever. Do we have, I believe there was a list of questions that were developed. Do we have those yet? Have we... When people are choicing out, are we trying to identify why they are leaving anyway, instead of just making assumptions?
There is not a list of questions. I can tell you that I was involved in that school choice committee, right?
Right.
That was in 2008. There was a discussion then. Nothing came out at that point. In the last two leaders in the district, that has not been a process. So I have a draft exit interview that I have done, haven't taken it anywhere, but I've been developing for staff as well, for employees. But that is a process we're going to start. But that has not been done to date. No.
That's disturbing, because I was under the impression that that had been done.
Back from that discussion in 2008 or more recently?
No,
Okay.
2008.
Maureen?
I just have a quick question, maybe a silly question, but what's the 0.6 or 0.7 of a student? Like, what's the?
So it can be kindergarten. If they're a kindergarten, it has a 0.5.
Right, okay.
Or it can be a portion of a year. So because we do Sims October 1, March, and June.
Okay, I see.
So
Yep.
this is good. That's a good question. So the numbers that Michelle used. So there's also a financial factor here. $200,000 more in charges than we anticipated. I don't want to steal your thunder. No. Charter came in better, so we're almost balancing out, so that's good. So there's a financial implication. But so last year, Michelle did, at this point last year, used the budget figures from October 1 for the fiscal 19 budget. So we're going to do the same thing this year. So I know it's floated too high, literally too high, not 200, 2 students too high. It could change drastically. This past year, we had more students. We had several of those kids who have moved to TECA actually moved over the course of last spring. So the change, I want to say it was 51 when we did the budget.
I budgeted for 59 because I knew there were a couple.
And we added, right.
Yes.
So at the end of the year, what did I say the number was? It was 56.9. Yeah. So it ended about true. But things can change quite a bit in the spring. So what this doesn't account for is there were other kids who have returned. So it's not a clear, and this is why it takes a long time to figure it out. I mean, to map out every child last year and where they went versus I just stuck with, here's the 84 kids that are currently out and figuring out where they were last year, and those 19 are my targets.
I have a quick question.
Gina?
Is there a way that we can track families that live within the district but that send their kids to private school? Like, obviously,
Yeah,
is
every
that
year.
included in any of this? This is just for people
is
that
not.
are officially
Nope, it
enrolled
is.
in.
Yep. So every year, Patricia has to do school attending children, is that what it's called? Does a report. She actually enjoys doing it. So she has to contact, and she gets information. You love doing it.
Is it like from the census?
So no, literally, it's from Patty doing her own census. So private schools, school to school. So there's forms that are transmitted back and forth. So it's private schools, technical schools, homeschooled, parochial separate than private? Oh, parochial are separate than private. So yes, so we have all that data. We don't necessarily have the contact information all the time. The information we have the most about is school choice because they've generally
Right.
been in a public system. But we're not charged for them. So there is a factor, there is a, I shouldn't say a factor, there's an implication in Chapter 70, because if there were 50 more students, we'd be getting 50 more per pupil
Right, so we're
dollars.
not charged for them, but that's still, if you're looking at a decline in enrollment,
Yes.
I'm thinking about young families that are already looking for other sources.
Yep. So that's not something we can't do. I have spent more attention and effort on students who we have a better shot of bringing back. I think that the private school discussion, I have a lot of friends who have kids in private schools, and there are, if you believe in private schools, you believe in private schools. Choices where it's, I believe in public schools and I'm here, but something went wrong, which let's fix that. Or, you know what, I work in Ipswich and the school's next door, it's a lot easier to take my kid to school there. And I can't argue with that. Please bring them back, but at least there's a reason. So that hasn't been an effort, but we certainly could. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other comments? All right.
So one more piece of data on that. So the 19 that are out, 7 are from Newbury, 6 from Raleigh, 6 from Salisbury. So almost a perfect split. 6 from each town, 1 extra leaving Newbury. So more on that as we go through the budget process. Just to quickly note the rest of the report, high school principal search process is underway, have a stack of applications, and seems to be like 2-3 a day now. The deadline is this Friday. Be doing some paper screening next week. The committees meet the following week, and we'll be interviewing by the end of January, and I'm still on track to hopefully announce and appoint someone by March 1st and have them attend the March school committee meeting for an introduction. Pine Grove School update, we're on track. Phase 3 is closing, Upper South, on February 9th. By the following week, they'll be transitioning to the Lower South. That will go through June, and then next summer is going to be the Madhouse completing everything. NAEP, just to let you know, we have schools randomly chosen to participate in the NAEP. And grade 4 at Pine Grove was selected this year. And then the budget process and timeline. And then on the personnel report, just to note, take 3. So now at the bottom, if you see on the bottom of page 1, and it goes on to the back page, so you can now see new hires. Anything with an asterisk would be a new position, and now you have that new category of per diem substitutes. So anyone that's hired as a per diem substitute is not filling any permanent role. They're hired when we call them. They get $75, $100, $125 a day, depending on the role that they're taking or coming in to fill. So if that format looks good to everyone, then we'll keep doing it that way. So any other questions, I'm happy. Did you bring copies? So, and we can, yeah, Michelle has it. We can get copies to you. You had requested current substitute listing, and we can get a copy of that to you. That is all teased out.
Is that it?
That's all I got.
Wow. All right. Excellent. No general action items tonight, so moving on to subcommittee reports and action items. Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee, Linda.
Okay. We had an advocacy meeting this evening. We didn't have policy, but for policy, we're going to, can you explain the policy?
Policy process, where we're at?
Yes.
Yes. So Mike Gilbert has retired, but he's on the books through the end of January, is handing the reins as our rep over to Dorothy Presser. There's another woman, and I'm blanking on her name, who's in the office that does the process with him. So you received A through F in December, correct? Not bringing it back for a second reading until it's full. There were some edits, I believe, A through F. You gave me, right? And Mike was quick to point out that those were all our policies that needed editing. But so those have all been edited. G through L has been reviewed again by the policy subcommittee. It's gone to Mike to make some changes in substance. He is sending me the finalized version that can come back to the February school committee meeting. We're actually going to look at it again on the February 6th school committee meeting. We can bring it on the 13th. There are 2 policies that we pulled out. We're basically done, G through L, with those edits. There are 2 sections. There's a technology section in J that's 4 policies about digital literacy use. We've edited those, and then I developed a new updated technology use agreement that's used for students, families, and staff. We'll bring that back to the February 6th meeting. And then the big one that is not going to get solved in February is dress code. Because the MASC recommended policy is 2 quick paragraphs because of the enforceability of 2 inches, spaghetti straps. So that can be handbook material, but not necessarily policy. So those 2 will come back, but in substance, we should be done on February 6th. Mike is taking the entire manual, temporarily putting an adoption date of April. So February, that would come to you with those 2 standouts. Probably just the dress code. In March, you would get all of those as a first reading. Hopefully bring back for a second reading A through L, the entire policy manual on April 10th. And that's the tentative date he's using. He's already sent it to the vendor to start sending it up online, which means by May, we would have our entire policy manual online, on their site, connected, and current. I've been here 40 years, and that's never happened.
Okay, and on the advocacy part, thank you, Brian.
My pleasure.
And on the advocacy part, you have in front of you a Triton School Committee Student of the Month nomination form. So if you guys and ladies can look at that, we would like to have a motion to start using this. Anybody has any comment on this? We tried to, under the character section of it, trying to incorporate as many students as we felt would fit into those categories. I especially wanted the last one, which is the significant improvement in academics, athletics, or performing arts, because whether you're a high-performing academic, athletic, performing, that's when most of the awards go to. So I wanted to make sure that we are incorporating as many students as possible. So if anybody has any changes or questions on it.
Comments? No? Okay. You need an official, you don't need an official vote. This is just, right?
I would say just to talk about the process that you discussed, so to implement starting this right away, that it would still come through the Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee, and rather than having it be at a meeting, so it's a public meeting and having to review applications, that it would be kind of rotating through the P&A, and I would work with that person, and then I suppose that would be work through the chair, and then it becomes a formal recommendation of the school committee each month, I guess. So we'll work on setting that up, and we'll start with teacher nominations and then expand from there and start small, so as to not get totally overwhelmed with the number of people being recommended, and as popularity grows, maybe you have to tweak the process if we're getting lots of recommendations and nominations. Paul looks confused.
Go ahead, Paul.
When you say teacher recommendations for the students.
I'm sorry, teachers are the nominees, nominators. Teachers are recommending students of the month. Whew, sorry, thank you for clarifying.
It is getting late.
God, it's getting late.
All right, is that it for P&A?
Well, we had a meeting with Julie Romano, and I'll just tell you that she's absolutely fabulous, and I think she's going to be a great asset to the school committee and what she's going to be doing with the community, within the community. And more to come on what she's got planned for teachers and students and the community.
Can I make a suggestion that maybe she come before the school committee? I mean, I hear her name all the time, but I couldn't put a face to a name.
I just put a face to her name tonight, so so yes, I think at some point we could ask her. Beth, she's not a secret, not a secret. Yeah, but I'm sure we could ask her to come in at some point. When I think she's still getting a handle on things was what I got from tonight, was she has a lot of ideas. She's getting a lot more ideas thrown at her, and she's trying to kind of get this base of programs started first. So I think maybe if we can wait until she's working on Snow Angels and Warm Your Heart, Project Warm, and yeah, a bunch of other stuff. So maybe once she gets those kind of locked and loaded, maybe we can have her come in and talk about those.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. That's it for P&A. Okay. Personnel and negotiations, Dina?
We are continuing meeting with the PEC, and our next meeting will be on the 27th. All right. That's it for now.
Excellent. And Finance Subcommittee for Deb, and if we can take... If we can take back up
yes.
the revolving accounts report too, please.
Yes. We had a very interesting meeting, some interesting topics. You have the minutes. Unless you have any questions about the minutes or anything in the minutes, then does anybody have any questions about anything in the minutes? No? Okay. Dina wanted to pull the revolving accounts report.
Yes. I have a question on looking at this. The school lunch fund, we seem to be trending backwards. Is this of a concern, or am I looking at this incorrectly?
No, typically the school lunch fund is always in a small deficit, may not have been in the past, but I would expect it would have been. We usually get our reimbursement the following month. So Lucinda, usually the last day that lunch is served, she submits the claim. It takes about a week to hit, so it's usually the following month that we receive
Maybe it's just it's become more apparent earlier in the year or something. I don't know, but something just looked off to me. But
yeah, no, typically that does happen, but the June payment that's actually received in July, the treasurer usually books that to June because it's the year end.
Okay.
So it does close.
All right, thank you.
It will be a tight year, just to let you know, because we're having a lot of equipment repairs, a lot of equipment malfunctions in the kitchen, so it's going to be a very tight year for food service this year.
No equipment malfunctions at Pine Grove.
No.
Better not be.
All right. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 23rd.
And in your correspondence packet, you'll find those two letters from Whittier noting the request for appointments for David Irving and Alana Gilbert's seats. You'll find the annual report from the North Shore Education Consortium and the annual report for CREST from our collaborative partners. And may I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor? All right, thank you all, and I will see you next Tuesday at 6.
No, it usually...
She has not heard anything. She's
right.
called
This is
Desi.
Linda. Couldn't be in.
Talked about the shutdown. That was you, right? Yeah. I was like, wait, what did I talk about? Yes.
Oh, that's
I had not heard that.